Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of my rendering um, and setting up camera animation out of Unreal 4. Um, let's go ahead and load in the new footage that we just rendered. As you can see here, this is the project that I built the original version in. And now that it's imported, we'll drag that down, create a new project. As you can see, the colors exceptionally different, and we will be going in and color correcting and adding, some post glows and anamorphic streaks and whatnot to the shot. The first thing that we're going to do is just kind of quickly set up our color correction, color grading really. And to do that, we're going to go curves, and because this is such a warm lit shot, I'm going to pull out a lot of the red, especially in like the highlights. Just because, to me, sci-fi things should be cold. They're in space or underground or, kind of dark and scary. And warm to me is a very friendly kind of color scheme to go with. So, maybe have the undertones be a little bit warm or yellowy, but alright, so it kind of gives us that almost 70s kind of color scheme, or film look to it. You see this a lot in Star Wars and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's precisely that, but it does have that kind of vibe. A little bit Alien, a little bit of Star Wars. And then let's just do a little bit of levels, and let's just bring up our darks a little bit and clamp down on our whites a little bit, because we will be adding a lot of bloom to this. Before we go ahead, let's go back to RGB and just kind of pump up our highlights here and kind of just pull it apart just a little tiny bit, just to add a little bit of contrast back in. But we brought up our blacks and we brought down our whites, so it's just to help compensate for that a little bit. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to duplicate that, and then we're going to actually get rid of all this, though we probably keep the levels because we're going to just add it back in. And we're going to color correct and tint, and I'm actually going to move the tint above the levels, or levels below the tint, just a little bit easier. The reason for that is just because working black and white, you seem to get better results. And I'm just gonna isolate our highlights, and what this is going to be our kind of anamorphic streak effect. So we're going to go blur, we're going to go into directional blur, 90 degrees, and 350 I think will be good. And this is going to be the only plugin that we use in this. We're just going to put some color, it's a VC color vibrance. It's from Video Copilot, and it's free. So I'm just going to make that blue and set that to screen. As you can see, have all that, and we can play with the levels to how streaky do you want it to be kind of thing. And the short answer is not a ton. You just want to kind of catch the lights and stuff like that, and you don't want to obscure the shot too much. Yeah, it's 400. Okay. And so from there, I'm going to go to new layer, adjustment layer. And you can do all your color correcting on the adjustment layer too if you wanted. It's kind of neither here nor there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a soft glow to everything. So we're going to go glow and go, oh my god, that's horrible. But we're going to blow that out, and then we're going to bring that way down. So that's good for now. Let me adjust it. Don't always like the glow. Sometimes I just like to duplicate my my color layer and just blur that, or do an adjustment layer and blur the adjustment layer and kind of bring its opacity down and set it to screen or something like that. But I think for now this will be fine. It's one of the reasons why I don't like the glow, because it tends to overkill, but it does help with our kind of atmospheric type of look. And now that we have that, we're actually going to duplicate our streak layer, and we're going to add a blur so that our highlights have just a little bit of halo to them, a little bit, just to punch them up a little bit. And this is another reason why we brought down our whites a little bit, just to kind of control all this. And back to our adjustment layer. Personally speaking, I like to add just a bit of grain to everything. Make sure that's final output. I like the Eastman color high speed, and I like to set the intensity to 0.5. That finish, 100%. Hopefully those of you watching it can see the grain. If you're watching on YouTube, you might not be able to see the grain. But at least to my friends, I always provide a full resolution MP4 file. And then after that, let's just throw down an unsharp mask. Make that usually go like 150 to 200. Partially because you lose a lot of sharpness in compression, but if you find that you get like a lot of artifacts and stuff like that, you can bring down your radius a little bit, or bring down the amount a little bit. And you're going to see a little bit more aliasing right now, but we haven't added motion blur yet, and that's going to be the last thing we do because it's the most render intensive. And it's also extremely easy to add. And since we're pretty much at that stage now, might as well go ahead and add that. But I think the sharpness kind of gives it a little bit of a painterly feel to it, and especially if you're doing something that's not meant to be entirely photorealistic. I think that's an interesting choice to make. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our remain, and then we're going to pre-compose, but we're not going to move all our effects into there. We could color and stuff like that, but I like to do the motion blur first. You don't want to put it on top of all the glows and stuff like that, because this is a pixel motion blur, meaning it's looking at the motion of everything in the shot and blurring the pixels, blurring the image on basically a per pixel level based on the motion it can track within the frame. And this means that you don't need to have motion buffers, but it also means that things like soft, semi-transparent effects like glows and stuff like that can confuse it, because you have something that's on top of something that's much further back, and so the parallax is going to be different, so it can get confused and add interesting distortions. And so generally you wouldn't want to do the motion blur through something like glass, but because I've done this previously earlier today, you don't really get the artifacting that you can get in that scenario. So we're going to hit OK, and we're going to open up this pre-composition and select that. Just go to Effect, Time, Pixel Motion Blur. And as you can see, it does, by default, does a pretty decent job. It looks pretty blurry. Generally speaking, depending on the look you're going for, this could be okay. I think I'm going to double the amount of blur, but you can see here it's entered, it added steps to that. So let's, since we doubled that number, we're going to double this number. And the steps are now pretty much gone. If you look really closely, you can probably see them, but it's not as prevalent as it was. So we're going to go back here. And so now our color corrected shot now has motion blur. The one thing that this method hasn't done is added motion blur to our glows and stuff like that, and our streaks. One of the things that you could do is set up the motion blur first, and then once you duplicate this stuff, use the pre-composition. But that won't increase the overall render time, because it's only calculating the motion blur once and then you're duplicating. But I don't like to work with the motion blur on just because it's slower. I mean, you can turn off the effect until you want to turn it back on, but I don't really think we need the motion blur on that stuff. Maybe when it's like zooming in or something like that, but really these streaks are an on-lens effect, and so they're less affected by motion than the rest of the scene would be anyway. It's like a lens flare. Yeah, generally, if it's fast moving, you definitely want to have motion blur on there, but you don't always need it. And depending on how much time you have, what your deadlines are, or whatever, these are just little things that you could go by, and not necessarily need. In this shot, you don't really need them, except for maybe during the zoom phase or something like that. But it really all depends on like how you want to go about it. Obviously, because it's a non-lens effect, it's always going to be in focus, so to speak. But if you're really worried about it, you could also pre-render these things and add motion blur on top of it later for something that's a little bit more accurate. But I'm not going to do that in this particular tutorial. The very last thing I'm going to do, just going to add a little bit of a vignette around the edge of the frame. Make it blue, just because in this particular color scheme I don't want to go to black. Just drag out kind of a rounded corner. Rectangle, invert that. Feather quite a bit. Expand out. And then set this to, you do classic color burn or color burn, depending on what you're going for. I'm going to check out color burn. Yeah, I probably like color burn better. Don't want to overdo it. Just a little bit around the edges. And you could take this a little bit further. You could add, grain, or like dirt to the frame if you're really trying to make it go for like an older film look. But I kind of find that stuff's a little bit too much, especially for something that's supposed to be like an animated project as opposed to matching older footage or something like that. But that's pretty much all there is to it. You just render it out and put it to your shop board or whatever. I think that's it. So thank you very much, and hopefully I'll have another series of tutorials coming out in the next day or so. But might be busy, so we'll see. That's it. Bye.